jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party.
I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
Well, this is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. First, though, a reminder of our top stories this evening. The identity of the alleged Chinese spy who befriended Prince Andrew and met prime ministers has been revealed as young Tang Bo, who says he has done nothing wrong. Bashar al-Assad has issued his first statement on being toppled from power and leaving Syria for Russia, saying he'd wanted to stay and keep fighting. And France is racing to send crews and supplies to its overseas Indian Ocean territory of Mayotte, where the authorities say they fear hundreds, even thousands may have been killed in a powerful cyclone. Well, hello there. You're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with The Sun's deputy political editor, Ryan Saby, and The Guardian's political editor, Pippa Crerar. Welcome and great to see both of you. So as ever, let's take a look at the front pages, shall we? Starting with the Eye and the revelation of an alleged Chinese spy at the heart of the British establishment, and his connection, of course, to Prince Andrew is lead story for the Eye, which says Britain is tightening surveillance on suspects from China, while Buckingham Palace is telling the Prince not to come to Sandringham for Christmas. Ryan's paper The Sun concludes that Andrew has effectively been stuffed at Christmas. Alleged Chinese spy linked to Prince Andrew is named. That is the front of Pippa's paper, The Guardian. The Metro steals a famous line from James Bond. The name's Yang, Tang Bo Yang. The Mirror asks how many more Beijing spooks could be operating in the UK undetected. While the Daily Mail asks why Prime Minister Keir Starmer is still fostering closer ties with China, or sucking up, as the paper puts it. Daily Express leads with a warning from a former head of NATO that the UK must boost defence spending or face scrapping 20,000 troops or perhaps even one of its aircraft carriers. Financial Times reports that businesses are cutting back on hiring new people and blaming the budget, in particular the extra burden of the increase in employers' national insurance contributions. And finally, The Star says Ebenezer Scrooge is alive and well, living in Fulham and charging his friends and family £75 for Christmas dinner. A reminder, we're scanning the QR code that you'll see on screen during the programme. You can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you listen to our guests. So let's head to Ryan and Pippa. Nearly a clean sweep of China-related news. Your paper then, The Guardian, Pippa, alleged Chinese spy linked to Prince Andrew is named. What have we learnt about him, given his denials, his assurances that he's done nothing wrong in his statement?
Yeah, and he's outed himself today. The individual formerly known as H6, amid threats from politicians that they would use privilege in the House of Commons to name him. I mean, the bottom line was we've all known who he was for days, because it's been all over the internet, both social media and international news outlets. So I think probably he didn't really have any option other than to out himself in this way. But it's absolutely fascinating, because we The Guardian and other organisations have talked about him being an alleged spy. And if you sort of mine into the detail of exactly what his role was, obviously he denies being a spy, but it seems that he was what I would probably refer to as an agent of influence. And he was a member of this United Front Work Department, which has been central to the Chinese Communist Party's ambitions for a century. I mean, Chairman Mao, no less, described the UFWD, as it's snappily known, as one of the Chinese Communist Party's three magic weapons, the other being the People's Liberation Army and the party's propaganda arm. So it's been absolutely central to China's efforts in this area for a very long time. But Prince Andrew is possibly one of the more unusual targets of it, because, you know, you might question here what influence he actually has. And I think the point here is that not that Prince Andrew privy to state secrets, which would have been damaging, whether it's sort of about cyber security or nuclear or, our infrastructure, which would have been damaging whether they leaked to the Chinese. Instead, that an association with him may have been helpful to open up doors to other people, whether that is in royal circles or whether that is in business. And it looks like here, certainly from the court documents, suggestions were that it was about introductions to businesses and also potentially could provide the Chinese with leverage when it came to sort of, for political interference as well. So it's not. I think when you're thinking about him being an alleged spy, we shouldn't sort of think about it through the prism of, James Bond, or sort of how we would classically define a spy. But instead, he's somebody who potentially is at a really key place in society, potentially in business, and potentially in politics, and that could open doors.
Yes, so if you, as an agent of influence, your main role is to make people think a bit more brightly about China, with your doubters you make them, a little bit cheerier about them, then what's the big deal? What's the difference with being a lobbyist or a trade envoy, for example? And if there's... what's the fuss about is what I'm asking. For someone like Ian Duncan-Smith, who complained in the Commons, as we heard earlier, 40,000 of these people from the United Front, permeating every part of British society. People are falling into different camps over this, aren't they?
I think you've got the issue of, was this guy acting as a British spy? Now, there must be some reason. We still haven't really got to the reason why the security services have actually stopped this guy from coming into the country. So I think it would be good to know the actual background to the decision that they've actually made. But as Pippa says, you've got the difference between the spy and the agent of influence. And I think that has just triggered the sort of backlash across Westminster about the influence of China on this country.
Yes,
and
while you're talking, let's look at the Daily Mail then, which is on this. Do continue.
Yeah, and I just think Keir Starmer's in a very, very difficult position on this. He's got... How close does he get to China? He was over, had meetings. He was over in Brazil the other week, I think it was, where he had the meeting with President Xi. So he's got to have a relationship with them because there's, obviously such an economic powerhouse. You can't shy away from that. But on the other hand, he's got to listen to what the security services say about that. And obviously, with the British economy not doing particularly well, you have to stick close to them.
And people talking about classifying different countries. Yeah. China should be in a different category. Tom Tugendhat really, talking about this today in the Commons. Why would that make a difference in how people deal with people from China? And does it become discriminatory to Chinese people at the end of the day?
So what this particular element of this debate is about is something called the Foreign Interests Register, which... actually, I wouldn't say Britain is unique in not having one, but I should say many other countries do have an equivalent and sort of look on Britain with surprise that there's not any sort of system when people working for foreign governments come to the UK to register here. And that could be sort of, people working in embassies as civil servants, effectively, but that obviously can also be those who are in it from a more sort of security perspective. And what Tom Tugendhat, who's the Conservative former security minister, has been saying the last couple of days is that, and I said again in the Commons today, is that when the Conservatives left government, this Foreign Interest Register was ready to be published, but that they'd had a big row some time ago about whether there should be an enhanced level. And that enhanced level would have sort of stricter conditions and would cover, presumably, Russia, Iran, Syria maybe, and certainly China. And then at the time, there'd been a pushback from big businesses with interests in China, things like HSBC, the Prudential, Standard Chartered, businesses like that said that it would make their lives far too complicated when it came to doing their day-to-day business. But they'd thrashed out all those rows inside government, and they'd come to the conclusion, despite the Home Office's because of the Home Office's concerns about the national security aspect of it, that's where they needed to fall, and that China, there was no point to this register unless China was in that enhanced tier. And what they're now saying today is, what he's claiming is that Labour are now unclear and having all those debates again about whether to put China in that enhanced register.
I think one of the fascinating things is this big row that's clearly brewing between the Home Office and the Treasury. Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, is said to be going to China in the new year. She doesn't want to offend the country maybe in any way. And then you've got the Home Office who want to clearly have a crackdown. So you've got this row that is starting in Whitehall. And how do you resolve it when you have these two massive interests in play?
Yeah, and the Eye suggesting that the UK needs to toughen up surveillance on China suspects. We're going to spy on the suspected spies by the sound of it. And as us as householders, every time you do online shopping, you're very likely buying something from China. So there's so much trade that goes on, whether you know it or not. So we're in a sort of peculiar position, aren't we, here in the UK, really?
Yeah, it was a very difficult one. And as Ryan says, I think that the fact that Rachel Reeves and the Business Secretary, Jonathan Reynolds, are expected to go out to China in the first couple of weeks of the new year, probably will expect Keir Starmer to go out himself at some point. He, as Ryan said, he met Xi Jinping, became the first British Prime Minister in, I think, since 2018, to meet a Chinese premier. They will be alive to what it might look like if they turn up in China wanting to sort of do deals, trade, talk about the economy, if they sanctioned them effectively at home. So they've got this big China audit, which they're doing. We're not expecting that to be published till March, conveniently after they've been to China. I'm sure that wasn't a factor in their decision about the timing of it all. But these things are very, very delicate balances. Starmer said today he was on a trip to Norway and he was asked about this in a very short press conference earlier, and he said that their strategy, unlike some of the more recent governments, is to engage with China, not going back to sort of the golden era, as they called it, of David Cameron and George Osborne, but to engage, and that would mean some cooperation, economic cooperation, but it would also mean being aware of sort of competition and being aware of, I've forgotten what the other C was, but it's something to do with security anyway. But they would have those three C's as a sort of their lodestar when it came to negotiating with China. But it's definitely a very difficult balance for them to strike.
Yeah, China, another review. Who'd have thought it, eh? But there we are. And just onto your paper, the outcome, of course, is not so great for Prince Andrew, as you so slightly undelicately put it in your front page.
Yeah, no, exactly. It was a really difficult situation for the royal family, but it does seem that Prince Andrew has learned probably from the Jeffrey Epstein incident, where they've actually acted quite quickly. So instead of letting that incident drag on, either Prince Andrew or his advisors have actually just cut him short from the sort of Christmas festivities and just said you're not going. It's just sort of how it looks to the rest of the world if you see Prince Andrew walking up to the church at Sandringham on Christmas Day, and I think this year he's just got to sit it out.
And if Chris Yang, as he was known over the couple of decades he lived here, met prime ministers and all sorts, is it being unfair on Prince Andrew to focus on him, or was there too much of a closeness, do you think?
Well, I mean, he was effectively given permission by Andrew to represent his business interest in China. He was very involved in this pitch to the palace, Dragon's Den type scheme that he had. Maybe he was an obvious target. I mean, in the court documents, which I'm sure you've read, there was a really interesting line, a sort of a note to Yang for points to take, conversation points to have with Prince Andrew, and it warned him that Andrew was in a desperate situation and will grab onto anything. So they clearly thought that he would potentially be, a sort of a readier, an easier target for cozying up for influence because of his own financial situation, because of his clear interest in the trappings of royalty, and they felt that he would be an obvious target for that, and it looks like it.
Yeah, very interesting. And just very quickly, Ryan, would it be helpful if we found out why security pulled him over? And would that help us understand the seriousness of this, do you think?
Yeah, definitely. I think one thing as well, because it seems like maybe the security services aren't there to be questioned by the media as much as politicians, maybe whether they came out to be answer questions on it. Do you think perhaps, in terms of transparency, that's one thing they could probably look at, but just maybe, a couple of sort of bullet points of exactly why they did it.
Especially
it would just
denied it.
Yeah, and it would just clear the whole thing up.
OK, we'll see what happens, shall we? Lots more still to come. Is an increase to tax on businesses leading to a hiring slowdown already? Discussing that next.
How are you?
Good morning. Good morning.
Nice to see you.
How are you feeling?
Looking forward to getting into the parliamentary chamber.
Are you any further forward to making a decision?
No, it's an important day today.
All of the claims were in line with my parliamentary duties, so I'm making that clear to you, Conor.
He was a Scot through and through.
He was a very good politician.
Alex Salmond was controversial, he was a disruptor, but above all, he was respected.
Will you resign if you lose this week?
Again, I'm not planning to, of course, lose the vote of no confidence. I'm planning to win that vote of no confidence.
His face said it all.
My intention to stand down as party leader.
This is now a storm with deadly consequences.
How are they feeling?
They're a bit scared at the minute.
We've been told to evacuate.
How are you feeling?
Devastated.
Hundreds of homes were wiped out by flooding. I'm Conor Gillis, Sky's Scotland correspondent.
It was probably the darkest time in my life.
Scott is 5 years sober after a cocaine addiction left him close to death.
Scotland has a shameful record. Worse than England, the worst in Europe. Why not just say you failed? Because then you might get more respect from families who've lost loved ones.
This is where one of the UK's most prolific rapists thought he'd got away with murder.
Sky News can reveal that former sex workers had told police he was sexually violent.
My Emma.
Free wherever you get your news.
It's over, isn't it?
The Americans say he is Rossi, a fraudster.
This has been one of the most bizarre cases ever heard in a courtroom in this country.
A dangerous murderer.
Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive Andrew Ennis after this?
She said she can forgive him, but as long as he's behind bars.
By doing the right thing, it's destroyed your life.
They terrorised me. They intimidated me.
Sky News, the full story first.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live. Live here from Washington.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before? Yes. Cheers.
We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
Well, welcome back. You are watching the press preview with me now, Ryan Sabey and Pippa Crerar. Welcome back to both of you. Ryan, let's go to the Financial Times, shall we, about corporate confidence and specifically hiring people for jobs.
Yeah, no, it seems like there's been a real problem, I would say, since the budget, but actually I think it goes back to sort of the beginning of July when Labour came to power, them sort of painting a sort of doom and gloom image and then coming up with the figure at the end of July of saying there's a £22 billion financial black hole. And I think that just gave the business community certainly the jitters. And I think from then there has been a real sort of lack of confidence. And when they've come to making decisions about investment in their own company or taking people on with new jobs, they've actually sort of erred away from doing that. And I think that, then we had the growth figures last week where we saw GDP down for 2 months in a row. And it led to some economists to say that effectively we're on recession watch, which is kind of the last place that a new government wants to be in.
Yes, indeed. Investment stalled because of uncertainty, and then investments, continue to stall because of the walloping on business.
Yeah.
So the growth budget will be what in the end?
Well, I mean, it is a problem that the growth figures were the growth predictions were so anemic in the budget in the first place. Yeah. And since then, we've had a series of economic announcements which suggests that they could be even worse than those figures. And Rachel Reeves has been quite open about saying that it's not good enough, we need to do better, we want more. She obviously is blaming it on the economic inheritance from the Conservatives, but there comes a point if some of and I agree with Ryan, it's not just about the announcements in the budget, it's about the tone that they set beforehand, that they were talking down the economy when actually they needed to be talking it up. Now, there's a caveat about this particular piece of research which the FT has splashed on, in that it reflects sentiment based on the balance between companies reporting improvements and deteriorations, and it can exaggerate moves, apparently, in the economy when many groups are hit by the same shock. And official data so far isn't actually showing that that redundancies have risen in recent months, or that the number of payrolled employees has fallen. So I think there's a little pinch of salt here that companies will they'll talk about the warn about the worst, and actually reality may not quite reach that point. But it is definitely a problem for the government that they appear to have hit business confidence when they're putting their whole economic strategies predicated on growth. And we've had a lot in the last week or so about planning and house building and how that is going to deliver growth. But that is not a quick fix. It doesn't happen overnight. And Rachel Reeves is in a position where she doesn't want to have a budget next spring. They're going to do the spending review instead. But if the government fails to meet their key fiscal rule, that they cover day-to-day expenditure without having to resort to more borrowing, then she's going to have a gap to plug, and she may end up being forced to have a budget in the spring after all.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah,
I was going to say, one of the big problems for the government is we can talk about GDP figures and all that, but actually what they want to do is make sure that people feel better in their pockets, and we're a long, long way away from that.
Yeah, and the inheritance obviously was post-COVID, post-war in Europe, post-energy crisis. You need to remember why the government spent so much, I guess, at the end of the day. Very quickly, 2 stories. I'm not sure we can. Maybe just jump to the last one. Yep. Should we just jump to the last one? Apologies to Kemi Badenoch's idea towards a flat rate of tax. But anyway, this guy here is going to charge people £75 for Christmas dinner. He's even got a card machine to do it. But actually, if you host on your own and pay for it all yourself, it is wallopingly expensive, isn't it?
It is. I mean, I'm having 15 people on Christmas Day. I hope you're listening, family, because I might get out my card reader, and 11 of them are staying for 5 days. So it's not cheap, but fortunately, I'm a classic Scot, and we'll be making sure that we sort of be big vats of stuff that everyone has to, turkey stew for 3 days afterwards, and all the rest of it. I'll make sure I stretch the finances as much as I can.
Yeah, home dug potatoes. I can just see it now.
Obviously,
actually.
Yes, no, but London garden.
But this is an alternative way of approaching it, isn't it?
No, exactly. If you do spend alternate years with other families, you can evens itself out. But actually, just getting the turkey is expensive. Then all the other bits on top, whether it's alcohol
and all the kids' presents
as well. Yeah, these things add up.
We're sounding a bit bar humbug ourselves. Let's stop there. Ryan and Pippa, thank you both very much indeed. Thank you. See you for more in the 11, obviously. Let's take a look at the weather now. Mild, unsettled over the next couple of days. Heavy rain and strong winds at times, turning colder on Thursday. A mainly dry and fairly mild start tomorrow then. Northwest Scotland and the west of Ireland will be wet. Ireland and Northern Ireland will stay mostly wet through the morning. The rain will become more patchy. Scotland and Northern England will see outbreaks of rain becoming widespread. Wales and the bulk of England, meanwhile, do look mainly dry. Windy in the west, coastal gales developing. It will be mild. Ireland and Northern Ireland will see heavier, more general rain returning from the west during the afternoon. Well, coming up, our press preview continues in Sky News at 11. We'll have more on the naming of an alleged Chinese spy with links to Prince Andrew.
day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
They want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened